Hey, what's up? Silas here. This is going to be an entry in the 10 nonfiction books that have impacted my life. This is going to be book number 5. As I mentioned in the other videos, somebody posted this on social media. It was pretty much post a book every day and tag somebody else and they're going to continue it. Now, you could just post a picture of the book without anything, but I decided to write a little something about each book and I decided let me do that in a video version as well, and there's going to be more books. I'm going to go and list this the first one. The first one I did was Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, about how violence has declined in humanity. The second book was Universally Preferable Behavior, A Case for Secular Ethics by Stefan Molyneux, which helped me kind of think of a post-Christianity, post-religiosity, post-theology kind of way of discussing the way I approach the world to people. I was trying to figure it out myself, being good without God, that kind of thing. You know, people say, how are you going to be good without God? How are you going to be good? Well, there's ways. There's very many ways to do that. In fact, people are good in spite of, not due to God. And that's actually going to be very related with the book that we're talking about today by Christopher Hitchens. But before we get to that, the next two books were by Dr. Thomas Sowell. It was first A Conflict of Visions, which is pretty much his Silmarillion, and he's setting up the background, his kind of encyclopedia, or not encyclopedia, but his kind of history to kind of understand the language, the alphabet of, I think, the way Thomas Sowell approaches the world, which is an excellent way, the constrained vision and the unconstrained vision. And it was Black Rednecks and White Liberals was the fourth book. And that's a book for me which I kind of got it brought a lot to me. First of all, just seeing how different cultures in the United States got created, and then thinking about my background as a Negro living in the United States of America as an immigrant and not necessarily being part of Black culture, but then going to school in West Virginia in just the cut down countryside of the United States of America and seeing certain similarities between what was perceived as Black culture or what was the kind of culture and environment you find here in Kenya and things like that, and then some similarities there, and just seeing the differences between different parts in the United States of America and things like that. So, this book today is going to be, as I mentioned, about Christopher Hitchens. And Christopher Hitchens has been he's been very important to me in many ways. I started listening to things that he was talking, YouTube videos of him going on debates and things like that, as I was pulling away from the Christian faith that I was raised in. He has a way with words, and just the way he presents himself, just the way he talks about things. If anyone has heard Christopher Hitchens, they would understand what I'm saying. If you haven't, I really highly suggest you even pause this video, just type Christopher Hitchens online on YouTube and just see one of the highest ranked videos or highest viewed videos, and just get a small clip of just hearing how he spoke and how he presented himself and how he talked. And he's very eloquent, very just laid back, and could just banter with, I think, that the best of them, and it was really amazing and admirable things. His presentation, his confidence, his mannerisms, I had some questions around that whole good without God preposition, as I mentioned before. And he had these things where he said, okay, there's this question, I'm going to paraphrase here, where he would propose to people and say, name one good thing that somebody can do due to God that somebody who's an atheist can't. And it's pretty much hard. I mean, no one could answer that. Then he says, name me one evil thing somebody can do in the name of God that an atheist can't. And that one, there's countless. There's things in the Bible about stoning people. There's things about murdering people. You have to enslave these people. And I'm not saying these things haven't occurred outside of religion, but he had this kind of, it was called Hitchens razor, I think. Should double check and see if it's actually the Hitchens razor, which is the actual term for that thing. So let me check. Razor is something else, but it was another tool that kind of gave me guidance when I was kind of just out there floating. I didn't really have too many people in my direct personal life that I could talk about to these things, since a lot of the people around me at that time were rather very faithful, and it was very difficult. But the internet is a great source, and having access to his debates and his words and his talk and things like that, and then eventually getting his audiobooks and eventually getting this Hitch 22 book where it's kind of going into the background because you're wondering, like, what does it take to build a man like this? Because he seemed comfortable, but there's also some things I'm going to talk about in the quotes here that kind of went against the comfort, and I can kind of relate to some of those things in some ways. But he's just an amazing guy, and just getting the look into his day-to-day life was an extra bonus that I really appreciated. And he actually was the one who was reading the audiobook, so I actually get to hear him talk and things like that. So anyway, Hitchens' razor is something else. It's an epistemological razor asserting that the burden of proof regarding the truthfulness of a claim lies with the one who makes the claim. And if this burden is not met, the claim is unfounded, and its opponents need not argue further in order to dismiss it. And so this concept is echoing Occam's razor, and I think he first said it in the Slate article saying in 2003, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And that for me has been something that I personally have spent a lot of time trying to understand why I believe the way I believe, why I don't believe the things I don't believe, why people believe in what they believe in, how I fit in these kind of situations. So if someone just says, yeah, you're my friend, but they give no evidence, then I'm like, yeah, I don't really have to buy that. Oh, yeah, I'm from this country. This is who I am. I'm an American. But they really give no evidence behind the actual. I know just technically, if you just have the paper, the citizenship, that's it. But people claim they are things, they like things, they hate things, they dislike things, they want things, they need things, without any evidence for it. Or they claim things exist or don't exist without any evidence for it. So him having this kind of search to actually find the truth and find the actual information and knowledge, for me was something that really attracted me to him. So now, so I'm going to open up by reading the foreword that he wrote for the release in 2011 of the paperback edition of this memoir. And he passed away on June 2nd of 2011, which is really unfortunate. One of the few people that passed away that I was like, I really felt that in a way, but he left us with such amazing work. So I'm still definitely most glad that I found him, and people keep finding him. In fact, recently I just found this interview that he had. He was talking about feminism. He's talking about the situation. He's like, okay, women shouldn't work. And he was like, a woman that none of my women should work. If I care about someone, I don't want her to work. If she wants to work, sure, but she shouldn't work. It's like, why would I want her to be coarsened by the labor market? And just the way he would talk. And the female who was interviewing him was like, oh, that's just wrong. He's kind of taken aback, but he just sits back there and kind of just a serene look on his face. This is the way he presented himself, and really taught me a lot in like presentation. I mean, something you may not think so, but I'm trying to work on that and just think about the way you actually express certain ideas is very key. And just check this out. This is just a forward. I suffer from stage 4 esophageal cancer, he writes. There is no stage 5. And I hope it will not seem presumptuous to assume that anybody likely to have gotten as far as acquiring this paperback edition of my memoir will know that it was written by someone who, without appreciating it at the time, had become seriously and perhaps mortally ill. When the book was published, I had just turned 61. I am writing this at a moment when, according to my doctors, I cannot be certain of celebrating another birthday. And as I said, June 2nd, that's kind of halfway through the year, so I don't know when this book was released. So I think he might have had one more birthday. He's seen 62, but he passed shortly after. Don't quote me on that, but really unfortunate thing. But now here we go into the actual quotes. What is it you mostly dislike? Stupidity, especially its nastiest forms of racism and superstition. So these are two things that have been very key to me. Moving around to different countries, different continents and things like that, I was trying to understand what is this supposed racism in the United States of America that I'm supposed to be so afraid of. Not just the United States of America, but the entire world. White people have somehow taken over the entire world, and you as a Negro, you can't do anything no matter what you do. But then I look back at my life and I'm like, hey, most of the people I knew in the United States of America who were my friends, who helped me out, who did these things for me, who did these other things without seeming to ask for anything back, were white. So where was that racism? Was I just not experiencing it? Now, where should I fit in? Should I feel some kind of hurt or feel some kind of way because of something that happened to other people who look like me, due to other people who don't look like me? And especially the fact that those people who don't look like me had more of a life living these times and experiences, going to school, going to high school, learning how to just be myself, playing sports together with these people. But I'm not supposed to be like those people because of who my parents were and the skin color I have and these genetics and things like this. So that whole racism situation was just, ugh. And to have someone like this who was so well spoken on a lot of things and applied it to all these other things was very heartening to me. He has this other quote where, I'm paraphrasing here, was talking about how a racist can't really be discriminatory because they are indiscriminate to begin with, by definition. And I think he's just getting at the fact where it's like, look, if you are racist, you are not able to discriminate between people of your own race. If you say, my race is better than that, all other races, you're not able to really discriminate and say, okay, me as a member of this race may be really good, but that member who's also a member of my race is garbage compared to this member of another race who's pretty good. So that's the ability to discriminate between people within it, because the word discrimination itself is not a negative word in and of itself. It depends on how it's applied. People are discriminate when you hire somebody. If you go to a doctor and you're like, okay, I have esophageal cancer, like Christopher Hitchens had, and you have the ability to pick any doctor, would you go to a doctor who doesn't know what he's doing? A doctor, actually, they have this situation. The doctor thing might not be really the best thing, because if you actually turn out, who do you think would actually have more patients die in surgeries, like high-end surgeries, like a brain surgeon? Who do you think would have more patients die? A really accomplished brain surgeon, or just like a mid-range or lower brain surgeon? I mean, chances are the more accomplished brain surgeon would have people die more, because that more accomplished one would take on riskier cases. So anyway, but I'm just saying, when you have friends, you should be discriminating. Like, I'm going to choose to hang out with these friends rather than these random people, because these friends are better people. They give me more value when I deal with them. Now, the superstition thing, of course, that whole situation, as I mentioned, he helped me come out from that. And I just really don't get that. I don't want to say everybody's stupid who does that. There's many reasons why people hang on to these things. And he helped me kind of understand the reasons why I was hanging on to it, and also the reasons why I could not actually make that kind of strong connection to it and hold on to it. Okay, now next quote. Here we go. During the 1992 election, I concluded as early as my first visit to New Hampshire that Bill Clinton was hateful in his behavior to women, pathological as a liar, and deeply suspect when it came to money in politics. I have never had to take any of that back. Whereas, if I look up what most of my profession was writing about that beefy, unscrupulous new Democrat, you'll be astonished at the quantity of sheer saccharine and drool. Anyway, I kept on about it even after most Republicans had consulted the opinion polls and decided it was a losing proposition. And if you look up the transcript of the eventual Senate trial of the president, only the second impeachment hearing in American history, you will see that the last order of business is a request, voted down by the Senate Majority Leader, to call Carol and me as witnesses. So I can dare say that at least I saw it through. So with Hitchens, he was, oddly enough, was at Oxford at the same time Bill Clinton was at Oxford, and he was talking about how he completely agreed with the whole thing where Bill Clinton said he did inhale marijuana because he'd seen Bill Clinton or heard of Bill Clinton, I'm not quite sure, I don't quite remember, having taken marijuana but ingested it as edible, so brownies or food, cookies, however you want to do it. It's different forms of taking in the THC. He said he had some issues with actual smoking. But you can see this is a kind of thing where he was on that whole idea of like Bill Clinton is kind of unscrupulous from earlier. He was politically, I don't know, I can't recall him saying he was one thing or the other. He was a British and American citizen, a dual citizen and things like that. And he did write a lot in, I think, the Atlantic and politically, and he wrote some things about the war. I think he was pro-Iraq war, and I don't know if he actually regretted that coming out later. He was really good friends with Salman Rushdie, who is somebody who had an intifada sent against him by, I think, the Iranian officials. So he's been involved politically, and he touched on those topics a lot. But this was kind of cool, just kind of seeing he was talking about things that happened in college. So just seeing that background of him and seeing his mentality coming through these things. So already at this point, I was still mostly dealing with just my own belief system. Now, when it came from understanding what my own personal beliefs are about the world, how the world itself is organized, now after that, I kind of came towards politics and started applying those things and could agree with some of these things. You know, at that time, it was like, oh, Bill Clinton's just Bill Clinton. I didn't really have any positive or negative. I think I was just taking in what the media was saying. And as he said this way, the sheer saccharine and drool of the media towards Bill Clinton, and you still see that happening with Hillary Clinton. You still see kind of the kid gloves. They treat the whole horrible things that Bill Clinton had done, and these were things that were known to certain people. So this is not new information for a lot of people. But the ability to get different voices talking about these kind of situations, breaking through this media kind of narrative, is something that's rather new. And I thought that was kind of cool. And you can see that with this quote. Okay, on to the next quote. Hitch, making rules about drinking can be the sign of an alcoholic, as Martin Amis once teasingly said to me. Adorno would have savored that as well. Of course, watching the clock for a start time is probably a bad sign. But here are some simple pieces of advice for the young. Don't drink on an empty stomach. The main point of the refreshment is the enhancement of food. Don't drink if you have the blues. It's a junk cure. Drink when you are in a good mood. Cheap booze is a false economy. It's not true that you shouldn't drink alone. These can be the happiest glasses you ever drain. Hangovers are another bad sign. And you should not expect to be believed if you take refuge in saying you can't properly remember last night. If you really don't remember, that's an even worse sign. Avoid all narcotics. These make you more boring rather than less, and are not designed, as are the grape and the grain, to enliven company. Be careful about upgrading too far to single malt scotch. When you're voyaging in rough countries, it won't be easily available. Never ever think about driving a car if you've taken a drop. It's much worse to see a woman drunk than a man. I don't quite know why this is true, but it just is. Don't ever be responsible for it. So this is one of the things, at the time when I did listen to this, I was still drinking. Right now, I haven't drank in almost 3 years now, and I didn't drink until after high school, and then there was times when I was like taking time on and off. But I did, when I was drinking, did break some of these rules because I was using it as a crutch. I was using it as something to avoid situations. I know there were some times when it was just better. Some nights were better than others. Some nights it was like, I'm really depressed. I'm really trying to hide from something. I'm going to drown my sorrows away and things like that. But this is one thing I saw about Hitchens. It kind of concerned me because it also concerned myself in my life at that time. And he was a heavy drinker. He was a regular drinker. Again, I think he followed these rules in general. Some people are just hold their liquor better. I don't know if they're used to it. There's also something of just people with these high IQs and them being able to deal with liquor better. You can't really tell they're as drunk, even if their blood alcohol level is the same. It's not really affecting their minds in the same way. It's an understandable thing. If your mind is going to be addled in a certain way, yet it's a lot higher than average, then you might come down to like an average kind of mentality. But this whole situation, it was kind of like off to me. But then he was very open about this. He wasn't somebody who hid it. He often would have at some events and some videos just have a glass with him there. I also kind of followed his advice, going over to like more like the whiskey and the scotch, and just go to a bar instead of getting a bunch of beers. You just get a few glasses of just something straight and you sip on it, and just have a better experience having it that way. So what do you guys think about these rules that he had? And it's kind of just showing that this book itself was more just like slice of life type of things, and then also went into more of an in-depth political actual issues. This was just about him just with his friends, how he composed himself, how he just spent his R&R. Okay, on to the next quote. About once or twice every month, I engage in public debates with those whose pressing need is to woo and to win the approval of supernatural beings. Very often, when I give my view that there is no supernatural dimension, and certainly not one that is only or especially available to the faithful, and that the natural world is wonderful enough, and even miraculous enough if you insist, I attract pitying looks and anxious questions. How in that case, I am asked, do I find meaning and purpose in life? How does a mere and gross materialist, with no expectation of a life to come, decide what, if anything, is worth caring about? Depending on my mood, I sometimes, but not always, refrain from pointing out what a breathtakingly insulting and patronizing question this is. It is on par with the equally subtle inquiry. Since you don't believe in God, What stops you from stealing and lying and raping and killing to your heart's content? Just as the answer to the latter question is self respect and the desire for the respect of others, while in the meantime, it is precisely those who think they have divine permission who are truly capable of any atrocity. So the answer to the first question falls in two parts. A life that partakes even a little of friendship, love, irony, humor, parenthood, literature, and music, and the chance to take part in the battles for liberation of others cannot be called meaningless, except if the person living it is also an existentialist and elects to call it so. It could be that existence is a pointless joke, but it is not in fact possible to live one's everyday life as if this were so. Whereas, if one sought to define meaninglessness and futility, the idea that a human life should be expended in the guilty, fearful, self-obsessed appropriation of supernatural non-entities, but there, enough. So this, as I said, really helped me when I was kind of trying to understand these things. Because I was like, okay, if somebody could argue that way, it's good to, I understand why people seek this reinforcement from people. It is good to find somebody who you respect or you look up to and then have them kind of say something you've been thinking about. It's much more eloquent and better way. But it's like, okay, yes, I see where that's coming from. When he says this, when he's speaking these words, I'm like, that means something. That speaks to me. That's something I've thought of. I may not have been able to put it exactly how you put it, but I see what you're talking about. And that question is the same. And now, as I mentioned, this actually went further. Once I started understanding these kind of things, what are the things that make me who I am? Why do I value certain things? Why do I not value other things? Where do people's ideas come from these things? And as he mentioned here, once about twice a month, depending on his mood, he'll answer back in different ways. I've gotten to that point where I was just an atheist, moving away from it. I was questioning it, moving away from it. And I got to be an anti-theist for a while, where whenever it came up, like, religions is what has destroyed the world, is everything. And then I kind of got to a point where now I'm just a-religious, where I'm more like a pantheist, where it has to be very situational for me to actually engage with somebody. If somebody outright that I think is willing to actually have a conversation about it is going to come out and just make a declaration like the simple one that you see on the political right often is, oh, we need more Christianity to make America great again. I'm like, nope, no, we don't. How so? I mean, the country was more Christian in the past, and then it became this less great place that you think it is. So going back to that is not really going to bring greatness back. How is it going to come back? There's a lot of other countries that are also a lot more religious that are a lot less great in whatever definition of great you want to have. So this whole idea that, oh, we need Christ or we need Jesus, you need Jesus in your life, that kind of situation didn't really fly with me. This whole idea that without God, how can you be good? It also carries on to the collectivist idea of the state, which I think is the next religion, which is the newest, most popular, fastest growing religion in the world. There's this one parody site, Babylon Bee, and they kind of saying like, oh, like politics becoming the fastest growing religion in the United States of America now. And it's a parody site, but it's a satire site, but I think they're right. I've mentioned this before in previous videos. I think they were 100% right. And as he said in the first quote here, stupidity, especially in its nastiest form of racism and superstition. Going on to a religion called statism, where it's a metheist religion, where people are looking around, they are the gods of their own reality tunnel, and they are able to imbue people with powers that are superhuman to kind of do what that God wants to do in the world, and that's the government. And they think, now, me as a God, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to put my faith in these government, these states, and those states are the things that are going to go around and impose my right and wrong on other people. And hey, if you don't have the state, you don't have me as your God, and the state that I have found to be worthy of my own level of what's right and wrong, then how are you going to be right and wrong? It's very insulting. I don't really appreciate it. Was really glad to see Hitchens talk about this in this way. And it was more just kind of saying different things that he'd said in the debates and talks and things that I'd seen. So now on to the next quote. I once spoke to someone who had lived through the genocide in Rwanda, and she said to me that there was now nobody left on the face of the earth, either friend or relative, who knew who she was. No one who remembered her girlhood and her early mischief and family lore. No sibling or boon companion who could tease her about that first romance, no lover or pal without whom to reminisce. All her birthdays, exam results, illnesses, friendships, kinships, gone. She went on living, but with a tabula rasa as her diary and calendar and notebook. I think of this every time I hear that callow ambition to make a new start or to be born again. Do those who talk this way truly wish for the slate to be wiped? Genocide means not just mass killing to a level of extermination, but mass obliteration to the verge of extinction. You wish to have one more reflection on what it is to have been made an object of a clean sweep. Try Vladimir Nabokov's microcosmic miniature story, Signs and Symbols, which is about angst and misery in general, but also succeeds in placing it in what might be termed a starkly individual perspective. The album of the distraught family contains a faded study of Aunt Rosa, a fussy, angular, wild-eyed old lady who had lived a tremulous world of bad news, bankruptcies, train accidents, cancerous growths, until the Germans put her to death, together with all the people she had worried about. So, with this one, he was a reporter, as I mentioned. He traveled around the world, talked to people for different things, for different articles and things like that, and he had a very interesting life. And with this one, on this quote, a few things with this. The way it affected me was in multiple ways. I've mentioned before how I traveled around, and this was pre-Facebook, pre-social media, as it was. The internet was still not in its infancy when I had my first, I think, second major move coming to the United States of America in around the 1994 time. So there was this situation where I remember being in college. This was in 2003, around there. 2001 is my first web design class, or was it 2002? Anyway, I had this idea to do this yearbook thing where I go to my school yearbook and I did actually a couple of watercolors for a different class. And I was thinking, let me get these pictures of all the people in my class and we can put them on this website and people can come in and check in and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing now, this is what I'm doing now. And then a few years later, or just a few months later, I found out Facebook was coming out. But there was things like MySpace and Friendster and all these other things. So that whole idea, I'm not saying it was stolen from me, but these were ideas that were going on because there was a need and the market provided for that need. People came in who could actually see through the ideas and managed to do it. And great job for them, and they were rewarded by it because that's a need. People like being able to share themselves. They want to feel they are actually known and a part of reality. So when you have him talking about this story and you think about this person of having their whole life wiped out. And I had that to a lesser extent. It definitely wasn't a genocide type situation, but the end here towards talking about what happened in this story with Aunt Rosa, where she had issues, the day-to-day things. There was some bad news, some good things, some worries and things like this. But the Germans came in. I'm guessing this is a during the war type of situation. Never actually read this story. Probably go to check it out after this. It's a small story. And wiped them out, killed them. All those worries were gone, out of her control. Really just clean slate, done. It's something new. We're talking about the Rwandan genocide. That's an actual genocide. What's going on in the United States of America when people start talking about, oh, there's a white genocide? I'm like, no, it's not like this. It's not like the rape of Nanking. It's not like the Holocaust. There's actual examples of genocides that we can still know about. You don't even have to have the actual example. Just simply sit there and think, what is actually happening? And going back again with this whole idea of the collectivist idea, with that stupidity, especially in its nastiest forms of racism and superstition. And I'm just thinking, like, because there definitely is racism in the people who are actually committing the genocides. Now, I think a part of racism in a lesser way, it might be racial, it might actually be an actual expression of racism in a lesser form of thinking that you as a race are just under attack. So first of all, define the white race. Whatever you want to define it, there actually is a possibility to define a group as white people. Now, are they truly under a genocide? Or is it similar to how people on the left just call people Nazis who aren't really Nazis, and people on the right just call things genocides when they aren't really genocides, because the world has become so much better that we've actually forgotten how horrible and vicious and destructive some of these things are. But as I was mentioning, I had this in a lesser extent. You move from one continent, I have my friends, my families, the way I look at the world. I know, like, oh, if I go to the store, I can expect to ask my parents for this kind of candy. Then when you come back, there's these kind of smells, these kind of seasons. And then all of a sudden, all that's gone. You go to a new place, new smells, new people, the way people look, new way things sound. You start getting adjusted to that, and all of a sudden, up and move to a whole different place. And that was my life. So I had this kind of experience where, are you really starting a new start? Are you really born again? Are you really a different person? I mean, the people that you knew are kind of gone. And I don't really I didn't really experience it on the inverse of it until I got older, where like some people were leaving the area, but it was mostly me being used to actually leaving. This was post college and things like that. And I'm like, oh, so that's how that feels. You kind of have this person who's part of your life, and then that person just gets pulled out. So you have your life, and then you get pulled out of this life. And you have all these things, and you turn them back on when you go back to that place, when you came back to visit, when I moved back to locations I'd been. So it was just kind of an experience where I kind of related to it in a certain way, but I already knew that what I experienced was no way as final as something like this. So I think having things like this, having these experiences to be like, I can relate to something and understand what something is, what an experience is, without saying my experience was exactly like that person's experience. If that makes any sense. So that's it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed this. That was just this book with Christopher Hitchens. When I extend this series to more books, I will probably talk about more Hitchens books because he's written a lot of really good ones that really helped me out. But this was Hitch 22. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have read the book, if you have any other stories from the book that you appreciate, any quotes and things like that that you want to discuss in the comment section, be much appreciated. Would be willing to discuss them. It was a long time ago when I actually listened to the book. So if you bring something up, just bring the quote and I'll see if I can remember it. We'll just interact with it. Feel free to also share your best Hitchens videos and debates and things that are on YouTube and things like that below. And I think that would be cool for people who come to this book review and want to actually get more Hitchens information. Maybe they can just scroll through the comment section and click on things and things like that. I'll leave a few of the ones that I like or have saved and things like that in the link below. But besides that, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Goodbye. Okay, the speed drawing going on with this video was Christopher Hitchens from my Anyone But K series, or Che Guevara. And Che Guevara was just this despotic Cuban, murderous warlord, homophobe, all kinds of bad things. He was a bad human being. But people, I don't want to believe that people actually know who Che was and still wear him on a shirt like that, thinking he's just this rebel. He's just, rebel without a cause. Yeah, I'm going to just have him as my shirt as a sign of rebellion and my rebellious nature. No, you don't want to be like Kay. You want to be like people like Hitchens. You want to be like people like Rothbard. You even want to be people like Count Dankula. So I've done different shirts, and I'm going to do a different series of shirts of people who I think, by far, are more worthy of being on a shirt and popularized than somebody like Che Guevara. So yeah, goodbye. Oh yeah, links below to the merchandise store where you can purchase that shirt and other merch and other things. Help support this channel. Goodbye. Also suggestions of who you think should be on shirts. Bye.